between the Ryans, just so you know.
And the webinar has started.
All right. We don't have a note taker yet.
Do we not? No, we don't have a note taker yet. Well, I mean, we're being recorded. I say let's roll with it, and
Okay.
I'll send her the recording afterwards, so we'll make it all work.
Sounds good. So let's do welcome everybody. Hello. I'm gonna go fast because I was asked to go fast, so we're gonna go. Agenda and materials review. Does anyone have an update on the agenda? I would say maybe we could move comments from board members and commissioner liaisons till after the training topic, if that's okay, and minutes approval till after the training topic. Are people comfortable with that? So Ryan can scoot on out. Okay, so we're going to do agenda and materials, and we do have a minutes recorder now. Then we'll do public comment, and then training topic, and then comments and minutes approval. Okay. So Leah, do you want to do your public comment?
Of course. So now is the time when we take public comment. If you would like to offer public comment, you can raise your hand in Zoom. We don't have any attendees over the phone, so I won't do that spiel. If you're having trouble raising your hand or trouble getting to offer your public comment, please email the auditor's office at policeauditor@eugene-or.gov, and we will get your comments entered in or around to CRB members. Seeing no hands raised, I think a panelist raised their hand. Rick Rosetta.
I thought I should kind of report about the ad hoc committee meeting. We have one more meeting, no, two more meetings. There's one tomorrow night, and then there's one on the 21st. No, I take that back. There's one on the 21st. That's all we have left. We had one last Wednesday. Unfortunately, in my view, the Register Guard picked up the draft report of the report that is in final stages, but it's not complete, and published most of the wish list of the people involved in the paper last night, or I think it was last night, yeah, or yesterday's paper. It has been an interesting trudge. Many of the no votes you'll see are mine. And that is simply not because I want to block what efforts the people for whom the committee was started want to accomplish, but because there really wasn't any discussion of significance about what was going wrong in Eugene that needed correction. I also think that the charge to the ad hoc committee was to review police policy and make recommendations for the city council to adopt to change police policy. Many of the changes that are being sought, as you can see in the paper and will appear in the draft report, are related to matters that have to be changed by state law, federal law, the Constitution, collective bargaining agreements, and other things that the city council cannot do, and for that reason are outside the scope of the charge of the ad hoc committee. And that was a large part of my problem with how it proceeded. Be that as it may, I was in the minority, and I will do what I need to do to put my position known in the final report in a submission. But if you look at yesterday's paper, you'll see what changes they've made or they want to make, and the city council will have to make their decision on how they're going to follow through on it. That really is about all I have. By the 21st, the final report ought to be done and should be submitted by the committee to the city council on the 30th. So that's where we are.
Thanks, Rick. Um, any other public comment? I don't see any other hands, so we can move to Ryan's training topic. Leah, I don't know, do you want to introduce him? I don't know him.
Sure, I can introduce him. Hi, everyone. This is Ryan. So this is Ryan Maloney. Sergeant Maloney is in charge of defensive tactics training and de-escalation training at EPD. He's come to speak to this group before, but we have some new members, some new makeup, and you all told me you wanted a training topic, so here we are. Go ahead, Ryan.
That was a phenomenal introduction. Thank you. So like you said, my name is Ryan. Thank you guys for having me. What I'll do is I'll share my screen here in a second with just, I have maybe 4 slides, just so there's some talking points. I'll try to condense basically what we do for all our entry-level police officers and new laterals and everything. We have a 2 to 3 hour PowerPoint course alone that we do to start over de-escalation, so that we're all on the same page with definitions, terms, what we're trying to accomplish, and everything we're trying to do. And then outside of that, we have multiple other hours of scenario-based training every year, and it's an ongoing thing. So basically, every single scenario that we run, every officer involved situation, whether there's force or no force, we run our performance objectives concurrent with all those, so that the de-escalation performance objective is on every single one of them. So it's always a debrief topic for every time we get together for that stuff. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen here really quick in an effective manner. Is that working? All right, perfect. Okay, so right here, I'm sure you guys are very familiar with the policy, but I just put a couple fine points here as far as the purpose and scope and the definitions of within our policy, the definition of our de-escalation. The first part, purpose and scope, obviously the de-escalation is designed to reduce the need to use force, recognize the sanctity of life, protect officers from harm, reduce injuries to subjects, and build community trust. This policy provides guidance as to the expectations of the Eugene Police Department in the application of de-escalation. Just quickly, as far as the verbiage on this, it seems a little ironic, I know, but the sanctity of life is followed up by protection of officers from harm, and then reduce injuries to subjects. Really what we train people on the sanctity of life is that we come third down the line. So really, in all honesty, that should probably be switched from the way we train officers and teach officers on the whole process of being a police officer when it comes to the sanctity of life. Innocent people, civilians, hostages, then us down the line. So we're third on the list, typically third to fourth. Having said that, the definition of de-escalation is written in our policy. Tactics and techniques used by officers when safe without compromising law enforcement priorities, which seek to minimize the likelihood of the need to use force during an incident and increase the likelihood of voluntary compliance. There's a lot into that. We unpack it a little bit more in our policy. Our policy isn't the most robust policy when it comes to this. It's obviously always a work in progress, and we've been having lots of discussions over the last few months, as some of you know, regarding different policies and how we're going to institute those and if there any changes need to be made. This is pretty small print. I apologize for that. This is the remainder of our policy. I won't go through it word for word, just because I'm sure most of you have seen that, and just for the sake of your guys' time as well. But if there is any questions that come up out of this, feel free to ask me that here in just a minute. But kind of an example of what we talk about with the new recruits is we base a lot of our de-escalation on certain factors, right? So we discuss respect, right? So when we show up, we're on a call, we're talking to people, you're professional, you show respect to people, treat them as you would want to be treated. Stay calm. Don't let the situation become bigger than it is, and don't be the result to why the situation becomes bigger than what it is. So stay calm, slow things down. Be honest with the people that you contact. Don't make promises you can't fulfill, and fulfill the promises that you make. Just as you would expect anybody talking to you to treat you in a normal conversation. Given the certain situations, think about the situation in their shoes. A lot of what we go to as police officers, we typically see people at their worst moment. Whether that could be your cat got run over by a car and you're hysterical because that's the biggest traumatic event in your life at that moment, or something greater, larger happened, death of a family member or something else, or even something more minute like a traffic ticket you're not ever used to getting and you don't ever want one. You have to try and put yourself in their shoes when you show up so that you understand that just because it may not seem like a big deal in the grand scheme of things, for them at that moment, that is a big deal. And you need to have some empathy for that. So we always talk about compromise as well. Compromising just means simply if you want something to occur, you have to kind of work with anybody, just like any sort of negotiation in life. So be willing to compromise. Listening. This is in no particular order because listening is really one of the primary things we talk about, active listening especially, and I'll get to it in a little more detail in a minute. But then just being human, understand that we're all human. This is a human interaction. This isn't just a police officer versus civilian interaction. This is a human interaction. Just because you're wearing the uniform doesn't necessarily make you inhuman. And you have to remember that. Our goal is to, where we explain to people, your goal should be to influence people to change their behavior if that's what you're looking for, rather than making. Making is that last step. It's the step when we don't have any other options and we're required by either city statute, state statute, or whatever it may be, just for the protection of somebody involved. We have to step in quicker than we normally would. But if you can communicate well enough, use all your active listening skills, slow things down, empathize with people, have a normal conversation with somebody to influence a change in their behavior, then you don't have to make it, and that's a win. That's a win across the board. Active listening, basically what we talk about with active listening in short is showing empathy for it, build a rapport, and then try to exercise some sort of influence. Active listening is a multifaceted type conversation, but in short, what we teach people to do is that if you don't actually listen to what people have to say to you, and you're just barking what you want done, or barking commands at people, or giving instruction, that's not a conversation. And without a conversation, you can't influence any sort of behavior change, or even figure out what's truly wrong. A lot of the times when we get sent to calls, we get the call details, we get dispatch giving us information, and I'd say at least half of that is probably either not correct at the moment we get there, or up for interpretation based on the phone tree and how we got that information. So it's a constant battle to figure out exactly what you're dealing with when you arrive on the situation. So without being an active listener, you can't have a conversation. And part of that active listening means that you're going to repeat back to those people that you're talking to exactly what they're saying, kind of paraphrasing in essence, so that you can build a rapport with them, so they understand that you're actually listening to them and that you can have a conversation with them and you can build that rapport with them. And we have scenarios specifically designed for that type of activity. In essence, I'm trying to get active listening all in one short gamut here, but through active listening, showing empathy, not necessarily sympathy. And that's kind of an important way to put it, because it's not that we're not sympathetic to the situation, but there's a lot of things that I go to that I've never actually been involved in, and I can't necessarily sympathize with that situation. And a lot of times it can be deemed as just insulting to try and sympathize with somebody who's in a high stress situation. But you can be empathetic to it, the fact that they're going through some sort of traumatic incident, whether that be a mental health crisis, whether that be a death or something else, or some sort of stress, or they could be under the influence of any sort of drug or alcohol or anything else, and the rational mind isn't necessarily the easiest to communicate with. All in all, you're trying to work through all your active listening to get some sort of behavior change. That's what you're kind of shooting for. We also discuss our contact cover principles with multiple officers when they show up on scene depending on the call. We explain to them that just the fact that you're in a police car and you're in uniform is already a show of force to some people. So you need to understand that just your appearance alone and just you interjecting yourself into a situation or stopping to talk to somebody, there's already this loss of empowerment. And that's really kind of what that is. It gets to a lot of people, and you have to understand that. That's why we impress upon communication, introducing yourself, explaining why you're there, explain what you can do, can't do type thing. Figure out what exactly they have going on. Or if there's a certain situation like a traffic stop, just let them know why you're being stopped, who you are, why you're being stopped. Then ask them for, whatever it may be, depending on what you need or whatever questions you have at that time, and see where they're at, or see if there's a medical issue going on, see if there's something else happening. Because if you just go into it as a robot, you're never really going to understand that stuff. And we're trying not to produce robots. We're trying to make normal human beings be police officers in a humane way, if that makes sense. But we also practice time, distance, and cover. Those are 3 principles just based when we show up, right? So depending on what it is, don't rush into something if you don't have to. Slow things down, come in calm. When things are hectic, stay calm. You talk in quiet voices. Don't raise your voice if you don't have to. And there's a time and a place for it, but if you can be that calming agent, typically it calms a lot of things down. Use cover and concealment and distance. So there's no reason, if somebody's in either a mental health crisis or under the influence of some sort of intoxicant, or they're just frantic and upset, rushing up to them isn't necessarily the right thing. And it can actually spin people in the opposite direction. So just keep your distance, keep things between you. There's no reason to do anything other than try and open up communication with them verbally, if possible. Then you can figure out whether or not you even can. We have a small group of hearing impaired people in this community that we contact on a daily basis. And if you're not actively trying to have a conversation with them, you're not going to understand what's going on. Same thing with any sort of language barrier or anything else we have going on. You have to open that conversation in some facet to do that. I will say that, sorry if I'm talking pretty quickly. I will say that everything I'm explaining right now is the ideal, right? So the ideal resolves everything peacefully, and there is no force response. So that's not always the case. In certain situations where there's an active assault going on, active fight, or an active threat where other people are involved, like the high risk calls we go on, we may not be able to open those conversations. We may have to interject ourselves immediately to try and diffuse the situation, or at least separate the situation before we can even start any sort of de-escalation. But just because we interject ourselves doesn't mean we can't continue to try to de-escalate the situation and stop any sort of potential force that could occur at that point. So we train people with that mindset as well, and we run them through scenarios like that. It teaches the officers how to control their emotions, control that adrenaline from things that happen, and to teach themselves through actively trying it and doing it, that they can remain calm even though they could be just freaking out inside, because like everybody, we're human too. There's certain things that are just scary. So in those situations, we basically discuss isolate, contain, evacuate, negotiate. So I'll use the armed suicidal subject, whichever the mental state, whichever it could be. We get a call for that. We show up. We have to isolate that situation. We have to first then contain it to make sure that nobody becomes a threat to the rest of the community. If we have to evacuate people either out of the house or neighboring houses, that kind of stuff, we'll do that so that they're safe, while trying to open up that communication. And then we'll immediately just go into the negotiate, stand back, don't engage if we don't have to, and try to build that rapport, and then work through our empathy, rapport, and then our influence, and see if we can get to that point where their rational mind and irrational mind starts coming into tune, where we can actually have a negotiation and compromise and work through a problem. So that was kind of quick. This is a couple examples of scenarios that we have that we use. They're constantly varying because with all the video and body worn camera and incidents we have that randomly occur throughout the year, we're constantly evaluating those. I myself, every single force response or use of force that we have or report that gets written or done on the street comes to me, and I review all of it so that I can see what we're doing, how we're doing it. Is our training effective? Is our training actually being applied on the street? Where can we change things? What can we do with our training to help debrief this with the officers involved so that we can make it better for the next time? It's a constant evaluation. So these are just a couple little ones. So an example scenario would be the call that the officer receives as it's midnight. You responded to a complaint of an intoxicated subject bothering people in front of a local bar. This is a pretty common Friday, Saturday night downtown. We get these calls quite a bit, whether our downtown officers are arriving to it or if we have officers from across town, because those officers are already busy showing up. That's not an uncommon bit of information, aside from maybe a description of the people involved that we're showing up to. So we don't really have a whole lot of information, but we have to respond there because bouncers are calling or citizens are calling. We've got to come down and kind of see what's going on, see if we can resolve it. So the response, what we give our instructor who plays is going to do the role play, is that when he's contacted, become immediately verbally abusive, make them de-escalate you. Once they calm you down, do what they ask. So what that means is, what we train our instructors to do is exactly that. Simulate that you're upset, you're not happy they're there. Say whatever, from multiple different experiences of calls we've been on, we just replicate that. Sometimes it gets pretty verbally abusive. That's just the nature of the position at some point. What we expect from our officers is to keep that distance, try to open up that communication, isolate if they need to isolate, and try and build somewhat of a rapport. Now, we always practice multiple officers, right? So contact cover, 2 officers. The next thing that we teach people that goes into that whole thing is, and we'll test them in these aspects, where if I'm the primary officer and I'm the one doing all the communicating, I may just be that person they don't want to talk to. I may just have that face, I remind them of something, or I grew up in this community and they remember me and they don't like me. I'm not going to be able to open any sort of rapport communication. The job of the cover officer and the primary officer is to recognize that, work toward recognizing that, and then transfer that. Where that's a point where I would ask the cover officer, do you want to have a conversation with this guy, or you want to talk to this person? And I would step back and I would become cover, so to let them know that it's not me, so try to change that. And even on the street, that's a very effective way to do things. For whatever reason, there's just some people that don't want to talk to certain people. So then they work to show that empathy, build that rapport, and try to affect some sort of change in the behavior. And we'll debrief that as that goes. If they don't, and they go in hands-on too soon, or if they don't try to de-escalate in an effective manner, as far as the standard that we have, then we'll just end the scenario and we'll start the debrief. We'll discuss the issues, we'll discuss what we saw, and then we'll reset and we'll run it again. And they'll have an opportunity to build on those mistakes and do that in training. The evaluator, they'll make sure officers are trying to de-escalate the subject and are not sarcastic or unprofessional in any way. And then we'll review the policy and any related incident regarding that. That's kind of in a nutshell a scenario that we would run potentially in training. All right, so that's kind of the short 3-hour-long PowerPoint class for you guys. Spoken really quickly with a lot of information left out, but I tried to put in as much as I could for you. I'll kind of open it up to any questions you guys have right now, or anything that's on your mind. Yes, Bernadette.
So on slide number 3, there was something about slowing it down. I can't remember how it was worded there. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
That would help.
Okay.
It says leveraging time by slowing down the situation.
That's the one.
Is that the one?
So how do you, I think most of the cases we've seen for de-escalation, it's that right there, that leveraging that doesn't seem to happen. And I wonder if if you're seeing, as these things come through, that's more of new people have a harder time doing that, or is it more of a person thing, or is it a time kind of in the uniform that sometimes dictates who's better at figuring out how to slow down and who's not as adept at doing that?
Yeah, there's a kind of a lot to unpack with that question. There's a multitude of different things. Obviously, personality comes into it. The human factor comes into it. And to get to the new officer thing, yeah, that's one thing. We are a young department because we're growing. And so trying to base life experiences as well and get people involved in those situations to where they can learn from them. It takes a little bit of time, just like any sort of training. That doesn't make it okay, but sometimes that's when those mistakes happen. I'm trying to make sure I hit all your points.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, how do you measure? We only see the ones where de-escalation didn't happen or didn't
Right.
happen well.
Right.
And so I wonder how you measure how de-escalation success is overall as a department. That are we seeing, just the tip of the iceberg, and everything below the tip is like, it works really well? Or, is it, are there more problems, concerns that need to be worked on, and we don't see as many as there really are? So how do you know that you're being successful? Because we're not seeing it. I mean, I would say as a board, we don't see the successes.
Right, which is unfortunate. Really, I would like you to see more of the successes. Honestly, statistically, when you look at the amount of times we use force based on the context we have, we're right down at a 1%. Based on all our context. So it's low, and we do have much more successes than we have failures. But we do have failures that we have to learn from. Sometimes they're hard lessons, to be honest. And yeah, we have to gauge it based on the totality of those circumstances, right? So based on what the crime is, what you're contacting the person for, there's situations where we can't really slow things down. We can try to open those conversations, but speeding things up is a tactical advantage for the situation based on what we're trying to achieve. So that's a hard thing to teach somebody that's never really been in a situation like that. So that's where you'll see some of those mistakes happen. So when I look at those videos and the ones that come to me that are that get routed back to me to ask what I think about them or what we're doing to evaluate this and debrief it, it's typically those situations where they're trying to, they're overthinking what they're doing, and they end up rushing into a situation because they think that that's the most tactically advantageous situation, where it's not. And then we have to rebuild and kind of recompute what we're teaching them, or their perception of what our policy is or what we're trying to accomplish. And then typically it's received well, and then we have a debrief on those situations, and we can continue to move forward, and we document that this is what occurred, and this is the extra training they got, the communication, and we move forward for the next one.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question.
Mhm.
Can you tell me a feel-good story? I mean, one where it really worked, where you were just like, you looked at it and you went, this worked like so well, so we know what it looked like.
I can give you a personal one.
Perfect.
If you want that. So
Yes, please.
So I show up to a call. There's a suicidal subject call with a knife, armed with a knife, yelling. He's in the street, like right around the street corner. I think it was down by probably between 5th and 6th Chambers area, Chambers to Grant. We have multiple officers there. You can hear the guy yelling on the radio when officers are trying to communicate with him. They're keeping their distance. They don't want to engage this person. They don't have to. Obviously, at this point, we do have like 40 millimeter, like our less lethal munitions ready, just in case he charges somebody or tries to charge somebody else. So when I get there, I immediately recognize the person as the person that I've contacted on multiple different occasions. I have a rapport, so to speak, a relationship of sorts with this person. He's he's homeless, so I see him on the streets quite a bit, and I've had conversations with him. When I get there, we have multiple different officers kind of trying to handle the situation, everybody talking to him, which doesn't help. That's too many voices at once. So at that point, I address that I know him. Let me try talking to him. So I got people to stop, and I open communication with him. And once he recognized me from introducing himself, he immediately just kind of de-escalated himself. He was able to kind of come back to that rational thought of, he remembered me. He knows our relationship that we've had. in contacts, and I've arrested him multiple times in the past. But I do it in a way that's respectful. I mean, it's a job to do, and he understands that there's repercussions to decisions he makes. And so I was able to open that communication with him, and within about 20-30 minutes, he was willing just to put the knife down and be placed in handcuffs so we could move on from there. At that point, there was no arrest, no crime, no anything. We took him basically to the hospital for a mental evaluation and got him some food and warm clothes for the night.
Thank you. I mean, those are the things that I think happen probably pretty regularly that we just don't hear about. So thanks. I have no more questions.
Okay.
I have a question if no one on the board does, although it's really on behalf of someone on the board, so it's not just me weighing in.
It can be you too.
Okay, well, I don't know. They don't like me to talk. Michael, do you have something?
I do actually. I had a quick follow-up. Bernadette's question reminded me of something that so Portland Police Bureau has puts all of these use of force reports on their website that are really as a researcher, they're really nice to see. And they do that partly because of the Department of Justice settlement. It's a condition of it, but they are really nice, and they show some of the kinds of things that you were saying in your last response to Bernadette, right? So how many of the incidents don't result in any use of force, right? And so it allows people to contextualize those cases that do result in use of force, and it could be that EPD already makes something like this available, but I'm seeing Leah shake her head, so I'm going to trust that she maybe knows. But I'm wondering if that would be something that might be, because it's just, I think a lot of times, maybe this is more of a police commission issue, and I should save this for next month. But I think a lot of times public concern gets kind of amplified without any kind of objective information. And so that sort of information, if it's readily accessible to people, can help them understand, oh, so my police department engages in this many calls, and like this really small part of the pie chart results in use of force, right?
Yeah, we do have, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer it. As far as actual uses of force reports, it's not a secret by any means, but there's a lot of times redacted information, things like that has to be done, and it's a constant manpower issue and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of above my section as far as that, as to why it's not as easily accessible. I would like it more accessible, I'll be honest with you, just because it really illustrates everything I'm kind of talking about today and some other big key things. Our overall use of force, like annual review and that kind of stuff, is accessible on our website, so you can see the numbers and statistics and things like that with those uses of force or our force response, depending on situations versus none. And then with our overall contact numbers, with how many actual person contacts we have throughout the year versus the actual numbers of any sort of force response. So you can correlate those and look at those. It's hard because there's a couple of different ways to look at it. Is, as the police department, a lot of times people are shielded from the ugly side of society sometimes. And in essence, it was explained to me once years ago, and it kind of holds true a little bit, is that sometimes an overshare of information that shows the ugly side, that in essence what we're trying to protect people from, we're kind of taking that burden on. They put it that way. And so it's kind of how you look at it, I suppose. But more information to the public is only really going to be a benefit to us. It usually is, as far as the police department, because not knowing creates people the need to fill those blanks in. And sometimes people just fill them in as fact and then post them that way. And then it just becomes fact somehow. And so I'm not opposed to more information at all. Like I said, that's above me to make that decision on how much that's sent out, because of the overall cost and budget and everything that has to do involved in it. But I don't see that being a problem. I mean, that's why our videos are accessible. That's why we wear video. That's why we have mics. That's why we have everything. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, no, that sounds interesting. And I was gonna say, Michael, that one of the things I'm looking for in whoever I end up finally hiring, whenever I finally get to hire people, is someone who can do more with stats than I can. Because I think one area where we can sort of help to fill that gap is with reporting and transparency and getting information out there. Ryan, what I was gonna bug you with was one thing that Lindsay on this, oh, and Michael, sorry, Michael, one more thing. That's definitely a good thing to talk about a police commission. Sorry, police commission. Don't use the informal here. Okay, thanks. So Ryan, Lindsay Foltz on this board is often talking about the metrics of success. And so I know, or at least my memory is that when y'all are doing training in the academy, and also like when you're actually in training, like you can do the scenarios and you can look at people's performance and you can give them like grades sort of on de-escalation, success and failure. And I know, like Bernadette was saying, we get a lot of the failures in the field here. But one thing Lindsay has talked about, and I think it requires an imagination and knowledge that I don't have, is how do we get a metric to measure success in de-escalation that is not like the absence of success? Is, it's not measuring the failures, it's measuring the actual, like all those times that it goes well. And how do we get that measured and attributed to officers in a way that they get that recognition and they get that support to continue doing it, I guess. Does that make sense?
I think so. Let me try to answer it. Let me know if I'm on the right basis. As far as an actual like matrix of this is success, this is failure, this is an A, B, C, D grade. If you can figure that algorithm out, you will make millions of dollars. And the reason I say that is because every situation is completely different from the other, even if it's the same call, like the same type of situation. There's so many dynamics involved in human interaction that it almost, you really can't even grade it as a success or a failure. There's leveling degrees of how you did certain things well and how you can improve in other things. So trying to give a set matrix on the increased grade or the success in the future is really difficult to do. And that truly is what we're trying to do constantly, is figure that algorithm out, so to speak. So I want to say that there's no actual, well, okay, don't get me wrong, there is an actual fail. There is an actual fail. There's one recently that you can probably watch. So, but the thing is not in our department. I wasn't saying anything about it.
Okay.
But what I am saying is that, but just because you don't do it the best way you possibly could in that situation doesn't make it a fail. It makes it an opportunity for success in the future, in essence, if you look at it that way. So you can debrief that, you can look at that. I can have conversations with those officers or training staff or their sergeants about, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. Try this next time. Like, try to work through this. Did you consider this? Did you consider this? We got the desired outcome. Everybody was safe. Nobody was hurt. We all went away happy. But I think this could have been better. And I think your interaction could have been better. So that's not a fail, but there is definitely room for critique and opportunities for more success in the future in similar situations. But then every time you interject another human into it, another person, that interaction changes so much. It's hard to get that set algorithm. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to avoid the question. I can't give you a definitive answer on it because there's just too many factors.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Oh, Michael, sorry.
Michael?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just, this conversation has me thinking about some of the so in education, one of the things that we do is, or one of the things that I do in my classes is I've been moving more toward group projects rather than individual assessment for students.
Mhm.
And students hate it because they don't want to be graded according to like someone else's performance. But part of what it does is, and part of the argument for it is, aside from the fact that most things we do in the world are in fact group projects, but it makes them like take responsibility for ensuring that the other people don't plagiarize, for example, and do the reading and get their work done on time, right? So they're because they rise or fall as a group, right? They become more invested in one another's success. And so I'm wondering if shifting this away from thinking about assessing individual officers around de-escalation, if there might be a way to assess to assess the force, or to assess, I don't know how, if there are subdivisions, and that might create more conversation among the officers with one another about how folks can like, who's really good at this. Maybe I should have a conversation with them and see how they're doing this, right? That kind of thing. So, and that also gets away from the sort of small sample size issue. That, you know, if there are very few cases of use of force, then like any individual officers, like the one time that they use force this year or the 2 times, are going to be probably so particular that you're going to have that apples and oranges issue. But if you think about the force as a whole, and you think about like what percentage of calls resulted in use of force, right? And is that number down or up from last month, or down or up from last year? That might be a way to incentivize de-escalation, and also take the spotlight off individual officers.
Right. Yeah, and we do in essence do that. Am I muted? No, I'm not. Okay. We do in essence do that. That's what I in essence do. You know, I take those use force reports. I see what's doing, what's trending, what obviously needs to be addressed that way. And one of the ways, and I'm not saying we do it perfect. There's always room for growth on it, right? To get to the group conversation, as you talked about, that's one of the big changes we've made when it comes to all of our video, because we have this tool and this technology. We're always filming, right? Everything we do is recorded, whether it's on our dash cam, whether it's the body cameras, that kind of stuff. So we have all this information and opportunity to review that stuff. So like our in-service trainings, where we bring the entire department together on 4 different days during the month, we will have those videos, especially like use of force. We'll go over those as officers that have done things successfully, that have done things that worked out really well, and we'll review those as a group, and we'll go over that, and then we'll kind of recreate those in our training facility so that we can then practice it and implement that, so that there is a group standard and the ability to see officers that they work with, or ones from the other side of the week that they haven't seen for a while, just because the way shifts are, doing the same situations that they are and being involved in the same calls that they are, and giving them that Rolodex, so to speak, that mental Rolodex, so they have something else to pull from when they're in a similar situation. Be like, I remember this, like, this is the standard, this is the expectation, this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is how they did it, I liked how they did it. And unlike your job, we promote plagiarism from each other. So we want the people that do it well to be plagiarized. We want the officers that do it well to be those leaders. We want those people to be the representatives of our department, as well as within and without. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I had a question that I think is kind of connected to some of this, and I don't know if you're the right person to ask anyway, but what we see in the videos kind of a lot this year, it feels like, is we see FTOs making bad calls and not necessarily encouraging their trainees to do the best thing. So do you have any sort of a system in place for when that sort of thing happens, maybe having them not be an FTO anymore, or take a break, or have training on their own? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're asking. And yeah, that's a hot topic with us in our training department right now, especially. So we're developing and trying to finalize everything, but yes, being an FTO is a privilege. Being an FTO is an honorable thing to do. And if you're not doing it well, there will be accountability for that. And we will review the videos, and you will be removed from being an FTO. And so we're documenting those things. Sergeant Soulsby is the one that heads up that division for the FTOs. Until we got an actual training staff, a full-time training staff, trying to get all of our 40 plus FTOs to training consistently to make sure they're up to date, current, following standards, doing that kind of stuff was very difficult. And it was not okay. I mean, we have to be better. So that was recognized, and that's really a hot topic for us right now to utilize that and fix that, because you could be the best future police officer in the world, but if you're not taught the proper way to do things, you're not going to do the proper way. So it's definitely under a microscope, and our FTOs have a large burden on their shoulders. And so we have to find a way to, now that one, the algorithm is a lot easier. And that one, it can be more strenuous because there is more expectation on FTO to set the standard. So I think we're a little off topic, but I don't mind taking the questions. I don't think so, but yeah.
Thank you. And I know I promised you 6:15, I think. So if there's any more questions, I think maybe just one, but I know Ryan's got to get out of here. So anybody going once, going twice?
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and welcome me back anytime you have any question or anything I can help with. I'm more than happy to chit chat and kind of go through the process with stuff. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
All right. Now we're going to do comments from board members and commission liaisons. And the order that I have on my screen, I'll share with you now, and then I'll put it in the chat. But I have Rick, Bernadette, Michael, Jose, me, and then I have comments from Lindsay emailed that I'll share. So if we can start with Rick, maybe Rick, you said it all already. I don't know.
I already spoke my piece, I think.
Bernadette.
Oh, thanks. Rick, I appreciate you being on the board and explaining that the no vote, bringing it back to our community. I think that's what's really important. I think when things happen on a national level that are problematic, it makes people want to make things better. But it's like the problems in other communities are not the problems in our community. And it's not to say that we can't improve some things and that there aren't some of the policies that, need to be corrected. I mean, we've seen that, whenever we do some different cases here. But I appreciate you, taking the time to, I would assume, tell the people on the committee that, let's see what we need to change for our community, not just do a bunch of wholesale changes, that sound really good, but aren't necessarily good for us. So, so I've been kind of watching it. I didn't get a chance to make it through all of the report that was in the registered piece, but what I did see was it concerns me because I know after being on this board a couple of times now and knowing the amount of time that we as community members spend engaged in the minutia of these reports, and to take the time to let people know how the police department can improve. Sometimes it's small bits and sometimes it's big bits. I think that's what's really needed in order to inform what needs to change. And so it concerns me that some of the opinions that might be on the ad hoc committee aren't really understanding what we already have in place to make improvements, and how we work within that framework, or add on to that framework and come up with other things. So I appreciate you being there and letting everybody know that, and I have nothing else.
Oh, am I next? Let's see. I don't think I have any comments as myself right now, but as police commission liaison, the police commission met last week and also the last month, and so there have been 2 meetings since our last meeting, and I'm still kind of getting the hang for that, which is sort of compounded by the fact that we're on Zoom. But it's just a weird way to start getting to know a committee. Sorry, Jose. but there's a number of interesting things happening where we finished up finally, I think, talking about the pepperball policy. And so that's done and behind us. There was a long discussion about the Citizens Police Academy, which I know has come up in this group before. And they're talking about maybe revising or restarting. And so that was a big part of our conversation in the last month. But so our next month is going to be our work plan retreat, and so that will be an all-day kind of affair where we're going to be figuring out what it is that we will talk about, what the work plan will be for the next 2 years. So if there are things in that anyone on this board has in mind in particular that that you think would be important from a CRB perspective for us to talk about, between now and the beginning of May would be the time to let me know. And I'll also make a point of checking in with Lindsay to sort of see like what her sense, she's the one with more experience on that commission, like what she thinks I should have on my radar for the work plan discussion. And I think that's basically all. The big stuff were also the field force policy we discussed last month and I think wrapped that up. So we are slowly making our way through those policies, and I'm not sure if they're improving or just the wording is changing in them. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes when you have like so many people putting in, as Rick probably knows, right? You have so many people putting input into something, and you're kind of like, okay, well, that suggestion was good. I don't know about that suggestion, and they kind of cancel each other out. So I'm not sure where we're at now, but yeah, that's all.
No comment.
I don't think that I have any comment either. I have a lot of comments just kind of in my head with everything going on in the country right now, but I don't know that I have anything formulated. But I don't know. I just wanted to acknowledge that a lot is happening and not within EPD. So I don't know that I have any reason to comment on it here, but that's it. Lindsay also didn't send me any comments for this part of the evening. So we can move on to minutes approval from the March meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made to the minutes from last month? I see head shaking and a thumbs up from Leah. Okay, I think that we can go ahead and approve the minutes from last month. I haven't been stopping for like movements. Was I supposed to do that for a change of the schedule and this? Like move to approve? I need to read that book about Robert's rules. Just need to do that.
There was
Okay.
something about approving by acclamation that we exceeded too long ago. So I think it's one of those things. Hearing no opposition, we have agreed by acclamation, something like that.
Okay. I did have a question that should have been in general comments. Is there any talk about making these meetings in person again? Leah, have you heard anything from Eugene?
I have not yet. We are still in compliance with the governor's stay home, save lives order. So there's actually language I'm supposed to read out at the beginning of every meeting, and I haven't done that. So I'm gonna just guess that until that stay home, save lives order is lifted, we will stay remote, but I will let you know if I hear anything from the city.
Please do. Okay, on that note, let's take a 5-minute break. At 6:25, we'll re-adjourn at 6:30.
What's your schedule on moving, Michael? Are you going to be leaving in the fall?
Yeah, I start in Texas in August.
That is a lovely time to be in Texas.
So I've heard.
All right. I don't see Bernadette back yet, but should we just start the case review?
I'm back.
Oh, she's back. Okay. Wait, did she say that?
She did say that. That was a
Did
mystery.
her microphone? I didn't see the little red thing go away.
I saw her, she got the green box around her.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll go with that.
This is the best, you guys. Okay, I will attempt to share my screen. I do not have the PowerPoint open. Hold on one second. But I did write it this time, so we got that going for us, guys. All right, thanks y'all. Sorry about that. To do the thing where I make it a slideshow. Okay, wow, that was much longer than I planned. I apologize for that. One case summary this month. Thank you. That helped. So it says case number 1, but we only have one, and it's about the vehicle pursuit policy. So just as a backstory to this, the pursuit policy used to be, like when I started, when Mark started, was very permissive, very pro-pursuing people. And that was one thing that Mark focused on a lot in when he started working here, was working with EPD to change that policy, recognizing that I think nationwide, something like 1/3 of all the people who are hurt in related to vehicle pursuits are not involved in the pursuit at all. They're just bystanders. So they're an extremely high liability, high risk, high danger part of the job, and not something that needs to happen as frequently as it was. So anyway, that's your backstory. Now I'll start talking about the case. EPD received multiple calls to 911 reporting a male hanging on the hood of a vehicle as it drove through city streets, calling, and he was calling for help. And this is just as an aside, I think it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that stood out to me when I first got the report. Just that's a different day than my typical 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But anyway, so eventually the male fell off the vehicle, and they dispatched sent an officer to go contact that person. Officer A was driving their patrol vehicle in the area and saw the suspect vehicle drive in front of them. They activated emergency lights, followed, and the suspect vehicle began to speed up and get away. And then Officer A followed. So at one point, Officer A reached 45 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone as they tried to catch up. Officer A aired that the vehicle went through a red light, and the officer followed. The Supervisor B then got on the radio and asked what probable cause was there for this, because I think at that point, so once as you saw, once an officer is breaking traffic laws, I just forgot what traffic laws were. Once an officer is breaking traffic laws, typically, and the person is breaking traffic laws, there's kind of is when a pursuit is occurring. So anyway, Supervisor B asked what probable cause there was. Officer A said there was reasonable suspicion for reckless endangering, and continued to follow, accelerated at 57 miles per hour in a 30 to keep up with the vehicle. The vehicle kind of stopped at a red light, then sort of saw all the cars and went through the red light. Supervisor C got on the radio to see if anyone was with the victim yet, so they could know more about what crime had occurred. And no one was. So Supervisor C then said, I'm terminating this pursuit if that's what we're in right now. So pretty much right after that, I think the suspect stopped in traffic at another red light, and there were a bunch of officers in the area. And so they pinned the vehicle, took the driver into custody. So this came to us because the emergency vehicles operation instructor supervisor reviewed the incident and was concerned that there was a pursuit, and that perhaps the pursuit policy wasn't followed. So the allegations were that Officer A initiated and conducted the pursuit in violation of policy, and then that Supervisor B allowed it to continue, basically, but that their management of the pursuit was in violation of policy. The recommendations were that it was actually within policy for both employees. Here are your issues for discussion. I will now point out that while I did take part in the interviews, Mark is the one who did the review of this case and the adjudication recommendation. So I've reviewed it and I will do my best, but there may be a few questions that I can't answer, but I will try. So I will stop sharing. And here we go.
Thank you, Leah. So we're going to do the same order, but we'll start with Bernadette this time for just general case comments at this point.
So I was on the board when it was that permissive pursuit policy. And yeah, it was really permissive to the point that made me kind of wonder why this one raised the concern for other people as I was reading through it, and was trying to figure out, it's like, is it because they didn't call out that they, as I was beginning to read it, that they didn't call out that this was a pursuit. And, you know, at what point does following become a pursuit? You know, is following and going above the speed limit, does that automatically make it a pursuit? I mean, I think obviously once they stopped, looked both ways at a red light and decided to proceed through it, and the officer went through as well, then yeah, I think we were, you know, at a pursuit at that point. But certainly the cases that we reviewed in the old pursuit policy really were some pretty frightening ones, driving down some bike paths and lots of things like that. So while I appreciate, I think it was the supervisor that indicated it was a pursuit policy is a little on the tight side, I think was the phrase that was used. I appreciate that it's on the tight side because we don't see them often, and the pursuit policy, I think pursuits are used judiciously by the department, and are safe. And I appreciate looking at this one because I think safety was really at the forefront of what the officer was doing while following this vehicle. And so I appreciated how quickly everything resolved. And I think it'd be interesting to have the discussion about how, as my understanding, the watch commander was okay with it. And then it was another supervisor that called it off. And the question is a watch commander over the supervisor? And is there any concern about that? I mean, just kind of maybe an explanation of the levels of supervision at some point in time. I just kind of had some questions around that. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. I think I had some similar questions. It was unclear to me, and perhaps, well, I think it's unclear in the file what exactly constitutes a pursuit. There was some disagreement between the officers and who were interviewed about what point something became a pursuit, and so yeah, that stuck out to me, that it seems like maybe it's hard to know when the pursuit has begun. Just to add to the Leia's opening background part, that one of the leading causes of officer deaths is also auto accident, and so that's another reason to limit these pursuits to only when it's necessary. And yeah, so that's all for me.
Yeah, so just a few comments to start out with. I know that this is for a specific, this comment will be for a different section when we talk about, I think, the investigation, but one of the videos, the sound cut out at 15:06 for a long time. And why was the sound turned off and then turned back on one of the officers' body-worn cameras? That makes me cranky. And yeah, so if there was a reason why it's turned off, I won't be cranky, I promise, but that's something that I'm cranky about. There also is a trend in cases of officers kind of not announcing, articulating themselves in different scenarios and situations. And I think that that is, look, I really appreciated what Ryan #2 said about showing up as a use of force. I've said this before, that I think that like once the policing apparatus begins to take into consideration the whole like sensorium of policing, again, as like another thing that Ryan also pointed on that I appreciated was that like people have different responses to policing. They have like phenomenological responses based upon their lived experiences. Whether or not they are rational does not matter. And I thought it was really interesting that in this case, this person's, identify, and I could talk about this later at some point, officer said, Brittany, why didn't you stop? And she said, I have trauma. I've been taken advantage of before, something along those lines. It's at minute 1022 in the file names are the officers' names. So I'm like trying to, as I was writing this down, I was like trying to figure out how do I talk about which file it is. I could just look in there and be like, it's the 6th file from the top or something like that. Anyway, one of those videos. And so I felt like this was the most Oregon pursuit ever. It was like really polite, and like the driver was making sure that everybody else was okay. And I was like, that checks out for this place, right? But yeah, I was also really, I don't know, touched, I guess I could say, by the fact that at minute 13:04 of the same video, this person says, thank you for your service. And one of the officer responds, I'm sorry we had to meet under these circumstances. So I think that I was also really, I want to wrap in Michael's comment about making like an archive of use of force. I think we'll get the real picture as to whether or not it is successful, like in a systemic way, once we see those numbers. And, we could put this as an example where I think there wasn't escalation, or in some ways, like folks, in some way the officers were humanizing this person in their encounter with them at just about every step. So I felt like it was necessary for me to put that on the record too. Thank you.
Okay, I have to admit that this one kind of confused me. And I think it's because, I was raised in the 80s and I watched a lot of cop shows and I saw a lot of pursuits. And to me, I was watching this and I'm like, well, they got to get the bad guy in loose terms there, because that's how I feel like, it goes. So there's a bad person and the police turn on their sirens and they go get that person. So it was interesting for me to learn that isn't the way that we want to do it, and to learn the reasons for that. And I think it's really interesting that we have this case, because on the surface, it looks like, everything's within policy. Everybody agrees. I don't know why we're talking about it, but I think stuff like this is important for us to look at, and for the public to also hear us talk about. That was my first thought. Oh, so then my next question, and this is maybe would be better during, I don't know where else, but I'll just ask it now and maybe Jason could answer it. But to me, it seems like maybe this officer didn't have probable cause to pursue this person from the onset, but at some point it became that this person was endangering the public by how they were driving down the city streets. So at that point, could that become probable cause to continue the pursuit and get this person off the road? So that's my first part of the question. And my second part of that same question is, if we call off the pursuit, then, for lack of a better term, we're just letting the bad guy go. So I'm interested to hear what would have happened had the pursuit been called off, and if bad, dangerous driving down busy roads. I mean, I know the roads that we're talking about, those are busy streets with lots of cross traffic coming from different directions. Yeah. Jason, do those questions make sense?
Sure, yeah. So the first part of your question about does the reckless driving necessitate, I don't even know what word I'm trying to say. Does it make a pursuit necessary? We don't use, it used to be where if somebody was driving recklessly before we tried to stop them, we could keep going because the reckless behavior wasn't a direct result of our pursuit. But now the feeling is we are basically causing this reckless behavior. So we don't use that to further the situation that's continuing to be reckless. So to try to save the public and the officers and everybody involved, we do not use reckless driving as a basis for continuing a pursuit. And what would have happened if we would have terminated the pursuit? Was that the second part? What we would have done is, well, we had the vehicle, obviously we had the license plate, we had the vehicle, we would have saturated that area with cops, we would have turned off our lights and obeyed traffic laws, but we would have basically saturated and hoped that she parked or turned off somewhere and that we could contact this suspect in another way or do some follow-up investigation later. We are pretty successful, even if we do terminate a pursuit, of apprehending the suspect at a later time. So it's not really necessary to do right then. It is something that can be achieved most times later, if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. So you're not just letting the bad guy go.
Oh, no, we don't let them go. We still have an interest in catching them. We just recognize that the need for apprehension right there is outweighed by the risk posed to the public. So we'll do it another time.
Okay, I think that really clears up this whole thing for me. So thank you for that. I have comments from Lindsay, so I will read those. She said, "Greetings, everyone. Sorry for missing the meeting tonight, and thank you all for your time and service. In terms of the case, I appreciated that the auditor requested that Supervisor C be interviewed and that the investigator followed through on this request. In an ideal world, I would have liked that interview to be recorded, but the notes summarizing the interview were helpful. I appreciated Supervisor C's termination of the pursuit and do not agree with Supervisor B's characterization of the current pursuit policy as overly restrictive. Pursuits are potentially dangerous, and there should be a careful consideration of risk versus reward. I think the current policy has greatly reduced unnecessary and potentially risky pursuits since it was put in place. I also don't think that there was an intentional violation of policy and that the adjudication and recommendations were fair and reasonable." So that is Lindsay. Next, we have Rick.
I have no further comments at this point. Thank you.
Thanks. So Michael, you will start us off talking about intake classification and monitoring and all of that jazz.
Sure thing. First off, I want to clarify. So I had said earlier that automobile accidents are one of the leading causes for police officer deaths on duty. And that is correct. It's about 27.8%. But vehicle pursuit is separated out from that. It's like only 2.6%. So it is a significant cause of officer death, but not as significant as I was thinking, which was factors in accidents and such as well. So classification, intake, and there's a third thing, right? Intake, classification, and
Monitoring.
monitoring. Thank you. I don't know what that is exactly, but
It's like that's the investigation on its own, like how, right, Leah? Like that's how the investigation went through. Like
I always, maybe I'm a narcissist, but I've always seen it as how did the auditor's office monitor the investigation? Did they do it adequately?
Gotcha. Okay. So intake is obviously an easy one in this case because it was internal, and classification, I guess, took care of itself. And monitoring, yeah, I think that I would agree with Lindsay on that one, that it was a nice call to ask for the additional interview with Supervisor C. I'm done. This is the first time I think I've ever confined my comments to just the thing we're supposed to be talking about.
It's my turn already? All right. Is there a time where I can ask, is there a more appropriate time? Look, it's at the end of the day. Brain isn't working terribly perfectly. Is there a more appropriate time? I forgot what the rest they were, where I could ask about the body worn camera. Is that part of the monitoring?
Sure, you can ask that anytime you want. So in general, that kind of thing makes me cranky too. I am not proud that I didn't notice it. Jason may have noticed it and may remember better than I do. My brain is not functioning properly either. So I was gonna, if you could maybe send it to me and I can take a listen and a look at it, and we could email about it, maybe talk about it again next month. Because I would like to, sometimes the policy says they're supposed to air a reason for muting or turning off. So I'd like to check on that.
It's the 19th file in the BWV folder.
Okay.
And
This is what you
it's,
said, right?
what's that?
1506.
It's at 1506, yeah.
I wrote
Yeah.
that down.
It would be fine for Jose to email you the name of the file also, right? Just to
Absolutely.
be more clear.
But yeah, I'll check
Um,
because that tends to stick in my craw as well.
Cool.
Nothing else for you, Jose, for that part?
I'm sorry. Over.
Okay. I also don't have anything. I did like how agreeing with Lindsay that it was nice to pull Supervisor C in, and I appreciate that. It was well done as usual. No surprise there. And Lindsay doesn't have anything to add, so we'll go to Rick.
Okay, this calls upon the work that I did for over 40 years, which is pick apart complaints that are filed. And with respect to the charge, I found that the two allegations were vague in that they merely said they initiated a pursuit in violation of policy. Well, how did it violate the policy? In order to establish a real good allegation, it has to tell us what part of this 3-4 page policy was violated. You can't just say generally violated policy. For example, they violated policy in that the seriousness and or dangerousness of the crime did not warrant police involvement. That would make it easier for everybody to analyze what was going on, and you could look at facts that would be dealt with on establishing that issue. That would be my only criticism, and then we can ring Mark's bell. We can call him up and tell him that he didn't satisfy Rick on his allegation. That would be the problem that I had with those allegations. And so you're left to guess as to what the actual facts were that they're claimed to be wrong.
That's good feedback, Rick. Thank you. And I'll definitely throw Mark under the bus for those. Yeah.
But wouldn't that then be putting the officer on trial, which was what Rick was just saying at the beginning of the meeting he didn't want to happen? So, but no, I totally understand. It's like when you have a policy and then you have such a broad interaction, it is. It's like, was it the initiation? Was it the running the red light? Was it turning the lights on? Was it the eventually pinning him at the end, even though they told that the pursuit, was called off? Yeah, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And then sometimes it's like they tell us what part of the policy they think was violated, and then we kind of go a different way and go, but maybe that was the part that was kind of the bad. So I kind of looked at this as Jason was, or as Ryan was talking earlier. It's like it was a success in the end, but it could have been done better. And so just like the de-escalation things, it's like, I think somebody said that, this wasn't an escalation. And it's like, well, I mean, it was an escalation, the fact that they turned the lights on, but, and started going after him. But in the fact that, it was a relatively Eugene type of pursuit, ready for an episode of Portlandia, I think is what Jose was trying to say there. I agree. I think that this was, it was a success, but we can still learn from it. That's all.
All right, Jose, you can start us off with the practices, policies, and training considerations section.
Yeah, there's a movie from the 90s, I forgot, with who's the guy that was talked about Tiger Blood on an interview a few years ago that he was in, and the whole movie is them on the freeway driving, trying to get to Mexico. Anybody remember
Charlie
that?
Sheen. It was
Yes.
Charlie Sheen, right? Okay.
Yes, and like the Red Hot Chili Peppers are in it. Anyway, sidetracked. Yeah, like this is not made for Hollywood. Yeah, I just want to say that again. I was as a matter of belaboring this point, I think I'm in a state right now where I need to see some good things happening in the world, and I appreciated that. Like when this person asked for water, a different officer went and got her water. It wasn't so like really seemed like folks were like coordinated. Like this was kind of a successful operation, even though like this person. Let me look at my notes here. This person had admitted at this point to being under the influence of THC, ketamine, Seroquel, and cocaine. Surprised they're driving a car. Nevertheless, all of those things considered, yeah, I was kind of struck by like thinking about the totality of the circumstances, and then I was trying to comb through the timeline to see exactly when they might have been pursuing, after knowing that that it was called off, excuse me. But then again, I'm kind of drawn back to the beginning on page 2 of 15 in the IA investigative report, that really we didn't know if the suspect had hit a person with a car, driven away. To me, it seems a lot more like the circumstances are, I don't know, I would say more awful in that, like, we don't know if this person was trying to get away from this other person from their personal safety, if they were under the influence of drugs, if it was both. I mean, there's a lot going on with this person. It was a humane response. The only thing that I wish that I will belabor from a previous meeting that I've said before is, what if the first thing that officers were to say to someone in the situation is, "Are you okay?" I'm not trying to nitpick. Yeah. So some kind of scripting, I think, might help folks in the future under moments of stress.
Thanks. Also, Jason sent me a direct message, I think maybe for everyone, but he says that he thinks it was called The Chase, the movie you were talking about. So there you have it.
Thank you, Jason.
Hard-hitting subject matter here at CRB tonight. But really, for real, we do. I think two things. I really appreciated a lot of the time in the jail or police station. I'm not sure where that is because I haven't gone on a tour yet, but I feel like the officers did a good job with the person once they were in custody and helped not escalate. I don't think that there needed to be de-escalation, but they didn't escalate the situation. I also think it's important to mention that Officer A being on the first pursuit of their career. I think that they did a lot of good in the interview, reflection on that part of this situation and how it was their first one and they were stressed and they were just trying to do what they think was best. That they thought that they had a violent felony person's crime that had occurred and they wanted to make sure that they did what was right. And I think, Bernadette often brings this up, that you have to look at how long people have been on the force. And I think it's important. If this had been a 30-year veteran kind of making this bad call of pursuing when they shouldn't be pursuing. That would read differently to me than a 2-year veteran, 2-year baby cop, right? But I do think it's good that they're being held accountable for making a mistake. You can't just forgive them for being inexperienced. Lindsay also didn't have anything for this. So Rick?
I have nothing further on that.
So interesting that Carolyn said bad call, because I wasn't going to have a lot to say in this area, but that somebody who'd been on the force longer would have not done this pursuit. And I'm not sure that necessarily somebody longer, and my internet's being really wonky, so if I go away, don't worry about it, it's not personal. And so I'm not sure that this necessarily wouldn't have been followed by somebody even with more time on the force. It might have looked different, but it might have been pretty close to the same. I also appreciated the honesty of this officer. It was just like very forthright in, I recognize that I might not have been saying everything that was kind of going through my mind. I might not have articulated it correctly. I might not have, done this or that. And clearly, I think learned a lot from this. And I contrast that with the supervisor who, I don't want to say was flip or arrogant, but just I think it was the very last line in their interview. I don't quote it wrong, so I'm not trying to find it, but I'm probably not going to be able to. But it was basically, if our policy may need some adjustment, if the status of my decision making puts me out of policy, I can live with that on this one. And I was just like, it just, I don't know, it just kind of read, odd to me. But I think, it was one of those things that's a dynamic situation, a lot going on. You hear somebody's on top of a car, you're going to make some assumptions if you're a 2-year officer versus a 30-year officer. And I think everybody did the best that could happen. I'll admit that I didn't watch all the videos afterwards or listen to the interactions, because how they interacted with the person that eluded them or drove away from them, wasn't important for our decision-making purposes. And so I looked more at, what happened before that point, whether it violated policy. So I appreciate, Jose, that you brought up that, there was some contact at the end that felt good in the sense of, how the interactions were between the officers and the public. That's all.
It's interesting that Bernadette pointed out that I almost said passage, that line in the interview, because I actually was gonna, I had that one dog-eared and I had the opposite page dog-eared, and I was gonna say, like, two of the things that I really liked in the interviews with these officers was that Supervisor B said, our policy needs some adjustment. If the status of my decision making puts me out of policy, I can live with that on this one. And then Officer A saying, I've never been in a pursuit. This is my first pursuit. I can tell you I was not prepared to answer that question about probable cause. I was focused on driving safely and also articulating what's happening driving wise. And so I liked both of those, because I felt that there was a candor that both officers were willing to give in their interviews that we don't always see. And I just think I found that refreshing. I found it refreshing to hear someone say, I might have been wrong on this. I might have made a mistake. That we all know that the stakes are significant for people when they're in this kind of interview about their their job implications or whatever. So seeing someone be that forthcoming about and honest I took it as honest, seemed refreshing to me, because it sort of says, yes, I recognize that, I don't think I violated the policy, but I recognize what you're seeing here, and that opens them up to possibly being disciplined if the adjudication goes against them. So I think that is behavior to be encouraged. Although I also see, as soon as when Bernadette was reading, I could also see then how that statement can be approached differently as well. So thank you for that. I think that's all I've got as far as this part goes. I think that I have actually a quick question for our auditor. So coming back to the question about the issue, going back to your request to interview Supervisor C, was there any thought of interviewing the emergency vehicle supervisor who initially made the out of policy call? Or
I don't, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember talking to Jason about speaking to that supervisor, largely because I felt like they had that chance to say their piece on it. They, to my memory, they weren't on duty during it. What I was looking for with that interview with Supervisor C was really sort of a gut check with what Supervisor B had just said, of like, okay, so you've got two supervisors on the radio, but one of them called it off and one of them didn't. And I wanted to know a little more about, but why then? What was it then? But yeah, Jason, I don't see him jumping in. So I'm assuming that I never talked to him about it.
Yeah, that's true. We thought that the EVOC sergeant had submitted his opinion on it, so I didn't see any need for that part.
Fair enough. Thanks for the clarification. It sort of helps me understand why you made this request. So I think that's all I've got on this for this part.
Okay, so next we have adjudication and then just final comments or concerns about this case. I start off and I will say that I agree with the adjudications and I don't have any more comments or questions. And Lindsay did not send me anything else about this, but she did say that she already read this. I also don't think that there was an intentional violation of policy and that the adjudication and recommendations were fair and reasonable. So I'll just say that again now.
I also agree with the adjudications.
I agree with the adjudications and have nothing further.
So I agreed with the adjudication, or I agreed with the internal affairs call, and then once I read the captain's report, I thought, oh, well, I agree with that. And then I read Mark's very, very brief comments, and you could tell he was eager to get out. No, that's not fair. But so I to be honest, and maybe this is something I shouldn't say, I would have been perfectly willing to go down the road with Sergeant Barrett with the initial investigation. So it's good that I'm not the only person with eyes on these, because it's just nice to sort of that we get several different informed views on this, and then we get to sort of sift through that on our own and make our own decisions. So yeah, I'll concur. Jose?
I'm sorry, I'm feeling especially chatty today. And so I would like to bring up one more passage. On page 12 of 15 of the IA investigative report document, the second paragraph from the bottom that reads, I asked A if Supervisor B's failure. Okay. I asked A if Supervisor B's failure to terminate the pursuit led him to feel as though the pursuit had been authorized. He replied, he didn't respond at all. So I believed I was doing the right thing, and I had PC probable cause. Okay, to continue the pursuit. So that's what I did. It's this next part that is intriguing to me. I didn't necessarily have a conscious thought. He's giving me permission because he didn't respond. I'm of the belief that people are the best way we can define human beings that they are the sum total of their habits. They are what they consistently do. And so it's interesting that we would have data, some kind of data here showing us that like officers in high stress situations are all semi-conscious, falling back on habits, and that like good policy can help establish good habits, or does the habits that we want to see. So I don't know. I'm beginning to believe that one more time that like if we hear training like that says even approaching someone is an escalation of force, which I think is the right way of thinking about it, and active listening means things like empathy and rapport, that we can actually make those habits, and we can find ways of making that like a habitual part of policing. So I agree with the adjudications. Sorry for the chattiness.
Don't ever apologize for being chatty. We're done. That's right. Yes, we're done talking about the case. So auditor report. We actually have time for it tonight, which is exciting.
Well, I did not prepare anything, so I will go for it. Okay. So yeah, these are very hard times. Like it is a very hard time for a lot of people right now in a lot of ways. And I would be remiss if I didn't say anything about that. I think what's going on in Minnesota is just heartbreaking all around. So yeah, on a more localized note for our auditor office, we are still very busy, and Beatrice and Vicky have been amazing and helpful and jumping in whenever I call them scrambling for something, which I very much appreciate. I am going to be working on the annual report, hopefully soon. Beatrice is working on the CRB annual report, so we will get that to your chair and vice chair to review as soon as we can. My hope would be to present those. Well, last year I think we didn't end up presenting them until November because, pandemic. But this year I'm hoping to obviously get those a little earlier. There is obviously a lot coming before council from this venue, I guess. They're going to be getting the ad hoc report. I'm going to be, I'll be sending them a memo to, based on my listening to the ad hoc meetings and recommendations that I can see. I think we have an extraordinary number of cases right now. So as much as I kind of wanted to poke fun at Mark for his brief adjudication memo in that case, I will probably have some similar ones coming up, and I'm just sorry for that. But feel free to poke fun at me when those come across your desks. Speaking of which, I anticipate that next month we will have the two mostly final cases related to the community impact case. So basically, we were still reviewing a little bit of video when we met last to review community impact case, and those videos showed a couple of things that we wanted to take a closer look at. So looking at the timing of those, I'm thinking we'll be getting those to you next month. The other thing, let's see. Lindsay has asked about the Rodriguez shooting. My understanding is that it's still not closed. She is checking with the chief, and I will let you know as soon as I have an idea of the timeline for that. I know that that's something that you all are interested in and want to review. And I'm going to bring Mark back for it. So I'm sure he's interested to know the timing as well. That was his case. We've had 2 deadly force review boards in the last few months, sort of catching up on incidents that occurred last year that we weren't able to do their force boards closer in time to, because we were consumed with community impact case and ongoing issues last year. So basically, we thought we'd hopefully have some time with things slowing down to get through the stuff that we didn't get to last year, but things have not slowed down. They just haven't. I've got about 10 adjudication files on my desk right now, and it's a little bleak, y'all. But I'm getting I'm getting support from the Employee Resource Center to work on hiring. We're gonna hopefully get that going, have some support, get things moving. If you guys have any ideas for people or traits or skills that you would like to see more of from the auditor's office, please feel free to call me or shoot me an email, because I'd love to hear that. I may be hitting some of you up for help on the interview panel, so I will let you know about that. I think that might be it. Let me make sure. I made some notes. They're all on random pieces of paper though.
I think Michael was saying statistic analysis would be a trait that we're looking for, so.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, mine is pretty basic.
I shot you an email with the fourth quarter 2020 Portland Police Bureau use of force report. It looks like it's their Office of Inspector General that did it.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Big
That's my job.
But it's like the level of the degree to which they drill down is pretty impressive. So if we could get someone who could do that sort of work, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think it would be great to definitely not have my basic undergrad statistics skills representing our office. So that would be great. Yeah, and I have lots of ideas. I'm really looking forward to getting everything settled as far as our new employees, so that we can all feel a little bit more support. But I think I don't know. I think that's it. I'm probably forgetting something, but I'll try to email you all if I think of anything that I need you for.
Another thing that I'll ask for people to reach out with is more training topics. I think it was interesting to have Ryan here for that training topic today. I think that I'd like to do a ride along now that I'm vaccinated, so that might be something that other people are interested in if you deem it safe. So I might ask for that. That's always, are they doing that even though the pandemic?
So they definitely stopped those during the pandemic, and I don't know that they've restarted them.
They're doing walk-alongs.
There you go. That's true. The downtown team is doing walk-alongs. That's true.
Yeah, and so I put in for a I want to do a Saturday in the middle of the night walk along downtown, because that's where all of our
deep dive. Very nice. Yes, those were my when I was doing ride-alongs a lot more often. I would go with Party Patrol, and those were always very interesting. Yeah, my aspiration is always to do a bike along. I haven't gotten able to do a bike along yet. I really want to.
I would die.
There's also, I just thought of it when Michael was talking, but if they do reconstitute the Citizens Police Academy, I actually did that when I first started. I was hugely pregnant. It was very awkward, but I do recommend it. Bernadette I think you were there. Anyway, no? We'll talk later. But yeah, so I do, it's obviously a massive time commitment, but it's very helpful for learning and seeing some of the stuff we see, but obviously not in the same super negative context. So
I also believe this used to be, I'm sorry, we're going off topic now, but I know that what is the state office of standards and safety something?
DPSSD. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that Chief Skinner is currently the head of, or something of.
Yeah, he's on the board or something.
Yes, he's head of the board.
There you go.
So that the lead instructor there, no, this is separate. Never mind. I'm going to get my details straight, and then I'll come back next month and explain what I'm trying to say.
Sounds good.
I'm going to blame it on being in my old bedroom from high school.
Great. I would blame that too. I couldn't handle that.
All right, so we have closing comments, and I will start with Lindsay for this, if you're done, Leah. Sorry.
Oh, yes, I'm done.
So Lindsay did have a closing comment she emailed to me, which Leah already talked about, but I will read her words too. I am dissatisfied. Here, I'm starting. Start again. I am dissatisfied that the Rodriguez case has not been finalized by EPD so that we can review it publicly here at the CRB table. I have been asking that we are be able to review this case since June 2020. So publicly put that in the record that you'd like that. And I would agree. That would be my closing comment, that we need to look at that one. And the other two deadly force review boards that met last month, I'm interested to hear more about that. And the community impact case, hopefully it'll be ready in May and we can get that. I would say that if it's not ready in May, I'd really hope that it's ready in June, because we're having 2 of our members turn over. And
It will be May.
okay.
There is a slightly related one for later. Anyway, yeah, the 2 ones will be May.
And I just went out of turn. I went Lindsay and then me. Sorry about that. So I guess anyone go next. We can just play fast and loose right now. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working. How about Michael?
Did you think about it, Michael? Did you come up with what you wanted to say?
Yeah. So what I'm remembering is that the head of the state police academy in Salem had made a comment at something that I was watching on Zoom, that citizens could also show up or contact him. This was post-pandemic, to come and learn about the academy there as well, and sort of see how police are trained. Seemed very open to not even just CRB members, but like regular old Oregon citizens to show up and sort of see some of the training. So there we go. But yeah, there's something about being a 50-year-old man in your mom's house, and it's just, yeah. I'm gonna shut up.
Rick or Jose or Bernadette, do you have closing comments? Rick says no. Jose says no.
I can't follow that up.
Bernadette, it's up to you.
Yeah, sure, I will. Leah, you did a great job. Thank you very much. I really like going back to our format of 1 training topic and 1 case. I hope we kind of maybe do a little more of that, because I think the trainings are really helpful. And I know that we had a lot of cases that we kind of wanted to get through. So I kind of feel like maybe we've caught up with that, or if we're going to go back to it, maybe we do it on an every other month thing, because 2 cases every month is just, I'm sorry, as an old lady, it's hard. So, and not even being in my old bedroom. So if they do get the police academy going, I mean, it's such a great thing for citizens to be able to see even just a snippet of the training and to walk through some of the training corridors that they do and be involved in things. It's pretty cool. My only final question is, so Rick, when the ad hoc committee finally makes a recommendation to the city council, I'm wondering what other members of the CRB think about the CRB as a committee writing a recommendation to kind of go along with yours, whether that's appropriate, inappropriate, helpful, not helpful.
I kind of wanted to perhaps make a recommendation that this group put in something. And right when the draft came out, I told Kevin Alltucker and Kaz Zaidi, who are the facilitators at this point, that they should probably at least include a copy of the annual report from the CRB and from the auditor's office and from the police commission. And they hadn't even thought of that. And they said they were going to talk about it and decide whether or not they're going to put that in there. Because up to this point, the ad hoc committee has no knowledge of what really has gone on in any of the groups. They've just made some assumptions. This is my view of it, obviously. There probably some other views of it, but my view is that they've made assumptions about what goes on in these committees and have an agenda for what they want to do to change it. And essentially, they want to make this CRB a group that a quorum of which are appointed by marginalized groups. So in other words, there would be one person from each of these groups to make a quorum for the board, that they would remain that way forever, that they would reappoint someone if someone's going to go off, they would reappoint someone out of that group, that they want to make this board a investigator and hire investigators and make this board a complaint receiver. By that, they're essentially, without saying it directly, abandoning the need or the desire to have the police auditor do anything. And I don't know what their agenda is on that, but that is, if you look at it carefully, that's exactly what they're doing. And then after the CRB investigates, takes the complaint, the CRB is then the adjudicator of the facts, and the CRB's word is binding on the chief. And the discipline is going to be subject to a matrix that's been pre-decided, and that will have to be involved in some bargaining and have to be accepted by the collective bargaining agreement some way. What Portland did in order to get around their deal was they gave everybody in the police department a raise, and the collective bargaining agreement was smoothed right out, and they agreed to it. But if you look carefully at what has gone on, that is exactly what's happened. And in order for, to give an example, the city of San Francisco has a similar system where they have one board that does the investigation, but they have another board that does the adjudication. The second board only becomes involved if the discipline is for 10 days or more suspension. If it's 10 days or more suspension, then it goes to this upper board, and this upper board hears it. Last year, that board was 7 members, each making $155,000 a year, ruled on 12 cases the whole year, because all the others have been wiped out or whatever. Their underlying, I couldn't get the data on how much the underlying board is paid, but in Chicago, the board that would be equivalent to the CRB is paid $11 million a year as their budget, which is probably close to a quarter. Well, it's probably a fifth of what the entire police budget, including cahoots and everything in Eugene. So the city council is going to have to make some hard decisions, and I don't know what they're going to do. I hope they keep it close to what we've done here, because I think that the work that was done to establish this board and the auditor system was very good work, and it's been successful. I think over 4,000 cases or so, and there are only 2 that really were complained of, the Babb case and the Elliott case. And both of those were tried in front of a jury in United States District Court in Oregon, and both of them, the city won. I don't see how anybody can contend that the work that's been done by the auditor or the CRB has been a violation of anybody's rights. But that's my opinion. To say that the board CRB could get involved in writing a response, any response to the board would have to come through either Lindsay or I. And I've spent, I don't know, hours preparing a response in my own words. I'm not going to say it's from the board or anything. I'm just going to say it's from me, saying why a lot of these things are not practical. I've approached this from the outset as being someone who does not oppose change, but want to propose things that are practical and can be accomplished in our setting. And I'm afraid that the wish list is way too big. So that's my view.
Bernard, I have an idea.
Well, so my thought was not, Rick, that we would write a CRB letter to the ad hoc, but once ad hoc sends theirs to the council, that we as a board might write something. And maybe we wouldn't all agree on some of the things, and I can completely understand that. But I think at least outlining what we as the CRB see as our role and how we've been successful in our role is an important thing to say, even if we don't agree necessarily with that we agree or disagree with some of the things that the ad hoc committee might want. But I think at least establishing that we as a group think that what we do has value.
I think that'd be very effective.
And
I think we're going to be open to that because they're going to have some board meetings to discuss it because they're going to have a lot of issues to deal with. And I think it's the city attorney has sat through all of the meetings as far as I recall. And it's that individual has listened and I think will be charged with trying to put this all together so it makes sense. So.
Okay. So those are my comments. I mean, I think it's just, I would like us to kind of think about if it goes forward as it seems to be going, that putting something together that we can all agree upon is stating what our value is. I think for me, it would feel good to be able to say that, just as a reminder that, there have been changes and those changes have been good. And it doesn't mean we don't stop changing, but don't throw out something that's worked and been beneficial. So anyway, that's all I have to say tonight.
All right. If that is all everybody has to say, then we can adjourn. Okay, so our next meeting is May 11th. And it will be on Zoom. So that sounds good.
If any of you are interested in trying to get together to do that kind of response, let me know. And I can try and coordinate you in a way that doesn't violate public meetings laws. I do my best.
Leo, will you check on that other thing that we talked about earlier?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Adjourned.
Adjourned.
Thank you.
Over and out.